Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to our virtual information evening for home educated parents and students. My name's Jo Edgerton. I'm the Pre-16 and Schools Manager at Nottingham College. Hopefully some of you will have seen me previously before. You may already have watched the video of High Pavement and will have seen me on that as well. But I may be a familiar face to some of you already. Thanks again for joining us. I'm glad I haven't had to drag you out of your homes. It's not a cold night, but it's still not that pleasant outside, is it? So maybe having it virtually is a benefit to us all. So as we go through this evening, you will be able to submit any questions and any questions that you may have as I go through the presentation. They will be published if we feel that they are relevant to everybody. If it feels like it's more of a personal question, we may well get back to you after the event, just so that we can fully answer your question. As they come in, I will do my best to answer them, but if it does prove too much of a distraction, I may do the questions at the very end of the presentation. So behind the scenes, we have got members of our marketing team who are making sure that the presentation runs smoothly, and we also have members of the Pre-16 team who are here to support as well. And if there are questions that are published that can very easily be answered, then my colleague Hilda will be answering those questions in the chat. But if it's something that requires a little more explanation, then I will go through that during the course of the presentation or at the end. Okay, so next slide, please. So just to introduce you to the Pre-16 and Schools team, as I said, my name's Jo Edgerton, I'm the Pre-16 manager. Here tonight we also have Hilda Slynn in the background. You won't see her, but she's here, I can assure you, supporting us. She is the Pre-16 and Schools coordinator. She does an awful lot of work behind the scenes in terms of supporting our management and reporting structure for our Pre-16 students, ensuring that all our systems and processes work smoothly and effectively. And she's also available to answer any queries or questions via the telephone or on email as well. And then we also have James Smith, who is our student attendance and support officer. So it's James who would contact parents if students aren't attending lessons, aren't attending college for any reason, but also may well be in contact with any concerns that you or that we as a college may have with regard to other things outside of attendance as well. Equally, he might support in terms of providing advice as to how your child can best access the support services within the college as well. So that's the team. Next slide, please. So just to go through the format of this evening, we have had some questions already submitted via the events when you made the application to come to this evening's event, and I will do my best to answer those as we go through the presentation. As I say, so hopefully when we cover the information this evening, it will I will hopefully cover those questions that you've already submitted. But we'll go through the Elective Home Education Pre-16 courses that Nottingham College offers. We'll talk about student support, and we'll also refer specifically to safeguarding and how we keep our Pre-16 students safe. I'll talk about the financial support that is available for our students. I'll talk through the application and enrolment process, and then at the end of the event there'll be an opportunity for you to ask any further questions that may arise as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. So our Elective Home Education Bespoke programmes, we have the Pre-GCSE programme, the GCSE programme, the Year 11 infill programme, and then our vocational short courses. All of these are, I say all of these, with the exception of the infill programme, all of these are exclusively for Pre-16 home educated students. So on the Pre-GCSE programme, the GCSE programme and the vocational short courses, they will only ever be Pre-16 home educated students on those programmes. When I talk in a little bit more detail about the Year 11 infill programme, you'll get further details about what's involved with that and the kinds of students that will also be on those courses. Next slide, please. So starting with the pre-GCSE programme then, this is based at High Pavement, and as I said at the beginning of the presentation, you will have been sent a link to a tour of the building. Had we been doing this in person and face-to-face, we would have included a tour in the evening, but we felt it was important that students had an idea of where they might be studying and get a feel for the building that they would be studying in. So the pre-GCSE programme is available to students in the equivalent of years 9, 10 and 11. So there can be quite a broad age range on that programme. It just depends on the sort of academic knowledge levels that students have reached as to whether or not they'd be doing the pre-GCSE programme or the GCSE programme. It allows students to get to know college expectations and mature in a safe and controlled learning environment. So it's very much a sort of nurturing introductory course to the college, and gives students who might be feeling really quite anxious about joining a different learning environment that opportunity to really get to know what college life is all about. In terms of the qualifications that we offer functional skills, English and maths at level 1. In the last 2 years, I think we've had new standards for those functional skills, so we are teaching to those new standards, and they were introduced to ease the transition from functional skills to GCSE. We also are offering a science level 1 college certificate. Now in previous years we have incorporated a BTEC level 1 applied science certificate, but what we found was that that was quite limited in terms of how well we could prepare our students for GCSE sciences. And so because we've got greater flexibility with level 1 qualifications, we've actually designed a college certificate, and specifically for this programme and specifically for home educated students, that will mean that we can incorporate much more of the biology, the chemistry and physics GCSE preparation. And so when students make that transition from the pre-GCSE course to the GCSE programme, they've got much more of a solid basis and understanding of those sciences to be able to progress more successfully. Included also, we have an enrichment and a tutorial programme, and so that covers things like an enterprise project, career planning, personal and social development. They look at sort of current affairs, at politics, at mental health. All of those kind of things are included within that section of the programme. And then progression from the pre-GCSE programme is either onto our GCSE course or a vocational infill programme if that's appropriate. And that will come down to the individual student as to whether or not they want to take a more academic route or they're looking for something a bit more hands-on. So in terms of the entry requirement for the pre-GCSE programme, we do need students to be working at entry 3 on the initial assessment to be able to access the programme. And I'll talk in a little bit more detail later on about what's involved with that initial assessment process. But entry 3 is the level just below level 1. So we need students to be working just below it so that we can be confident that when they join the course and then progress through the course, they will be in the right place at the end of it to be able to achieve those level 1 qualifications. So for this year, there will be 2 groups of level 1 and they will both be based at High Pavement. And there will be a group of entry 3, but that programme is going to be slightly different. And there's a slide later on that explains a little bit more about that entry 3 programme. Next slide, please. So I know one of the questions that came in beforehand was just getting some kind of idea of what a typical timetable might look like. So this is an example of one of the groups from this year. So you can see that there are 4 science lessons a week, 2 enrichment lessons a week, and then 2 English and 2 maths and 1 tutorial. But generally students are in college for 2.5 days a week. We have had one group this year where unfortunately because of timetable restrictions we weren't able to fit it into the 3 days and we had to have it over 4 days. But it did mean that 2 of the days were shorter. But you can see that students therefore might be starting at 9 o'clock, but they could have quite a late finish. One of these days obviously finishes at 4:45 and one of them at 5:15. But there is a greater flexibility in terms of there being 2.5 days when they're not in college. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what to expect. Just to explain as well, the pre-GCSE programme is an all or nothing course, so it isn't one that you can just opt in and think, well, I just want to do functional skills English, or I just want to do the maths, or I fancy doing the science and the maths but not the English. It is an all or nothing programme, so if you sign up for the pre-GCSE programme, you're signing up to all of the elements of it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so then this year we are introducing a slightly different entry 3 programme, and this has got much more of a vocational slant. So we've still called it pre-GCSE because it's still an opportunity for students potentially to progress onto GCSE or potentially onto the level 1 pre-GCSE programme once this has been completed. This programme is going to be delivered within our foundation learning faculty, and they are based at Basford Hall. So it's important to remember that if we're looking at this entry 3 vocational course for your child, that would be at a different campus at Basford Hall. But it's based very much on a programme that's been delivered to post-16 students successfully. And the reason that we've set this programme up is because in recent years we've noticed that there's a difference in the cohort of young people that are coming through as home educated, and there's a significant number that have recently been in school where they have found that the school environment and the strict rigidity of that school environment really hasn't suited them, and that they are perhaps more of a vocational learner as opposed to an academic learner, and because of that, that's potentially led to some issues in school. And so this programme really tries to address some of those issues that these young people may have found in their previous education experience. So in terms of what's on offer, again, it's English and Maths functional skills, but at a slightly lower level at entry 3. We'd offer a BTEC vocational skills qualification. We're also looking at a personal skills, a very small personal skills qualification as well. So there's a lot of emphasis in this about the employability skills that a young person might need moving forward, not only in terms of sort of future career planning, but also in terms of their progression within college as well, and how those qualifications might help them in a way become a better student. It will also include some vocational tasters in a variety of areas, and students will be able to choose those areas of interest. But it's important to note that those vocational tasters will be alongside 16 to 18-year-olds. The rest of the course will be separate and will be pre-16 home educated students, but for the vocational tasters, we have to get involved with the older students for that, unfortunately. So it's aimed at those who are wishing to take a more vocational route, or it's for those home educated students who may have found the school environment challenging and need further support around study skills, in terms of what I've already spoken about. It is very new. I've only had conversations with the curriculum team about it this week, and therefore at the moment it's not available to apply for online, but it is something that will hopefully very soon be available to apply for. But if you are interested in it, you can send an email with an expression of interest, and we can make sure that a place is reserved for your child on that programme. So one thing that I didn't mention about the other pre-GCSE programme is that alongside both this programme and the other pre-GCSE programme, you can do one of our vocational short courses as well. We are only funded for a certain number of hours for home educated students, but because of the relative shortness, or I don't think it's quite the right word, but because there's only 14 hours or so a week in the pre-GCSE programme, we do then have the option of being able to include one of the short courses as well. The funding does allow us to do that, but obviously it's dependent on whether the timetables allow that to happen. So we've got different curriculum areas timetabling these courses according to what's convenient for them, but that does sometimes mean that because we can't coordinate them together, that there sometimes is a timetable clash. I can see that there's a question there about what would the BTEC vocational skills be. So it's an entry 3 qualification. It looks at things like employability skills, and it sort of looks at the kind of I'm going to sound very basic here, but it looks at the kind of vocational skills required to do vocational style jobs in the future. It looks at personal skills, it looks at target setting. Yeah, I hope that gives enough information to, if I'm completely honest with you, I'm not 100% au fait with the content of that qualification, but it is very much focused on those skills required for the workplace going forward. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to the GCSE programme, again, this is based at High Pavement. And that's where our full-time GCSE course is delivered as well. It's also where our A-levels are delivered. So those young people that are looking to make that academic progression, being able to study at High Pavement is a real advantage, because it's almost aspirational to see the progression that you could take in terms of starting potentially on a pre-GCSE programme, moving on to the GCSE programme, and then onwards to A-levels, and potentially then on to higher education from that point as well. Traditionally, we offer it only to students in years 10 and 11, but we do sometimes get some very bright year 9 students for whom the pre-GCSE course perhaps wouldn't be quite challenging enough. And so we would ask students to do a GCSE assessment to see whether or not they would be able to cope with the GCSE programme. And then, having met them, if we felt that they had the maturity, then we do sometimes offer places for year 9 students as well. When I say we do that, we probably have 2-3 year 9 students a year accessing the GCSE programme. So it's very small numbers, but we don't want to hold anybody back. And, you know, if we can provide that stretch and challenge for those students in year 9, we're happy to do so, so long as we feel that it's the right fit for that student. So students can choose up to 4. So I said earlier that we're funded for only a certain number of hours, which is why we have to put the limit on 4 subjects. So we offer English, foundation maths. So we always say foundation maths because although we do have students every year who would like to do the higher maths, we offer foundation just because the majority of our students are, we found in previous years, are going to be at foundation level. That's not to say that we don't support those students who would want to do the higher maths, and we can do that either potentially by looking to see whether or not we can infill them into a post-16 higher maths class, or we can provide access to all of the provision workbooks, resources, learning aids for the higher maths, and ask parents to provide that support at home, and then we can enter the students as a higher maths entrant for the GCSE when it comes to it. But we would still need them to attend the foundation maths class and potentially be working with the higher maths work within those lessons. But we do require registration, and they do need to be attending a maths lesson in order for us to make the registration for the higher maths. So then we also offer biology, chemistry and physics, so the 3 separate sciences: history, psychology, sociology, religious studies, business studies, and then new for this year, we're also offering English literature. Every year we have some inquiries from parents and students, do we offer English literature? And it seems a shame not to be able to jump, you know, to see if we can support those students who might be interested in that. So it's a small group that we're offering this year, but hopefully it will be one that we will have a fair take up from as well. So the programme does also include a mandatory tutorial session. That's 1 hour a week. So if you think that we've got 4 hours, 4 subjects, for every subject you'd be doing 4 hours study per week, and I'll come on to a typical timetable in a moment. And then you've got an hour's tutorial, probably once every other week. You're looking at between 16 and 17 hours of tuition in college every week. So all subjects are graded 9 to 1 now. We have none of the old GCSEs that were A-star down to G grades. It's all 9 to 1, 9 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. In terms of pass marks, you're looking at a grade 4 and above as being a pass mark. So a grade 4 is what would have been a low grade C. Grade 5 is a high grade C. They say grade 6 is an old style B. Grade 7 an old style A, grade 8 an old style A star, and then grade 9 a brand new higher level for those students aspiring to those high grades. And the awarding body that we use is AQA. So if you're interested in sort of potentially getting a head start, you could be looking at the AQA website for further resources available in the subjects that you're interested in taking in September. And then in terms of the initial assessment, it does require a working towards grade at initial assessment in both English and Maths to access the programme. Now, it's important to stress that's not working at grade 3, that's working towards grade 3. And again, we have that entry criteria because we want to be certain that because we're delivering GCSEs within a year, we don't have the normal 2 years that a school would have to deliver these courses, that actually there's an awful lot of content for students to get through. There's a lot of work on their part to ensure that they are going to be able to achieve a pass grade. So we need to be fair to the students to be certain that they stand a good chance of getting a grade 4 or above, which is why we say that the entry criteria is a grade 3. I can see that there's a question about assessments, but I am going to come on to those later, so hopefully your question will be answered when I talk about that in a little bit. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a typical timetable. You can see that the subjects are divided into two-hour slots almost. So students studying any subject would have to do 4 hours per subject per week. There is always a 15-minute break in between the 2-hour slots, so we aren't expecting students to sit at their desk for 2 full hours. Yeah, you can see also the tutorial session. Now the tutorial sessions, that does look like it stands out on its own there. We have to work with the timetable that we have available, and occasionally the tutorial sessions don't quite fit into the timetable according to the subjects that the students have taken. So there are times when there can be quite a large gap between lessons and then potentially having to come back in for lesson. But it is important to note that those tutorials are mandatory. You know, we're no different from a school in terms of the fact that we do need to make sure that we are looking after the well-being of our young people, that we're preparing them for future study and progression and the world of work, and the only way that we can do that is in a tutorial session. So it's part of our pastoral support that we have to offer, it's part of the programme of study. And so although some students may look at that and think, well, you know, why would I need to go to a tutorial? It's about making sure that they understand that it's a holistic approach that we're taking. It's not just about study that we want them to do in terms of their subjects. It's about making them a well-rounded student and offering them that sort of well-being and pastoral support that is essential as well. Okay, next slide, please. So I can just see that there's a question about tutorials. So just while we were talking about tutorials, it's similar in terms of what I've already mentioned about the pre-GCSE. There's career planning in there. There are some mandatory tutorials around safeguarding. So we do some around prevent and understanding prevent, making sure that if anybody does have a safeguarding concern, what to do and how to report that, what a safeguarding concern might look like, how to keep students safe online. Then they're the sort of mandatory tutorials. I say mandatory, but they're the sessions that we have to cover in terms of what we would be assessed for from an Ofsted perspective, but also to make sure that we are keeping our students safe. But then also within tutorial, it's very much an opportunity for students to sit down with a tutor and think about targets that they could set themselves in terms of how to improve. So there are regular reviews throughout the year where students have a one-to-one with their tutor to talk about how things are going, talk about any support that they might need, and then yeah, sort of make a note of those, and students can make their own targets as well. So I hope that covers the tutorial question. Another question I can see, where do students go during the breaks? So in the 15-minute break, it doesn't give you much time to go off site, and we would ask students not to go off site during a 15-minute break. There are no shops close by that allow them to get there and back in that 15 minutes. So generally students will just sort of take a walk around the campus. They might go down to the canteen, grab themselves something to eat, and then return to the classroom. By the time you've done that and nipped to the toilet, that's pretty much your 15-minute break. Some students just choose to stay in the classroom for that 15-minute break and just have that opportunity to chat with their friends. It just depends on the individual student. In terms of the longer breaks, potentially over a lunchtime, or where there is a bit of a larger gap between different subjects, students do have the opportunity to leave campus. We do ask for parental consent for them to do that. I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail, but they are able to leave the campus if parents consent for them to do that. You know, we aren't far from well, High Pavement particularly, we aren't far from town, so some students do tend to go into town, grab themselves something to eat and come back. And as I said on the tour around High Pavement, students are welcome to bring their own food into the college campus and eat on in the canteen, the food that they have bought. Okay, they can also access the library, and if a classroom isn't being used for another lesson during their break time, and so long as they are respectful of that space and not making a mess and being too noisy, then we do allow students to use classrooms as well. Okay. So, moving on then to the Year 11 infill programme. So this is only available to students in the equivalent of Year 11, and the reason we restrict it just to that year group is because the infill programme means infilling onto a 16 to 18 programme, a post-16 course. So students would be studying alongside 16 to 18-year-olds and not exclusively home educated students. And because of that, we don't want there to be too great an age gap between our pre-16 students and those students studying on it as a post-16 option. So for obvious safeguarding reasons, that's the reason that we restrict it to Year 11. Very occasionally, we do have some Year 10s who may have been with us for a year on the pre-GCSE programme, who turn 15 quite early on in the academic year. And for whom actually a vocational programme might be the better option, and then we work in conjunction with the curriculum teams across the college to see if we might be able to offer a Year 10 infill programme, but it's only when we know the student and have known them for a year and we believe they've got the maturity to be able to work alongside those older students. So they're available in a range of different vocational areas. Pretty much any of the vocational areas that Nottingham College as a whole offers, we can normally infill a pre-16 student into. Typically they are offered at level 1. Usually because they are the more vocational programs and students need to build up their skills in that particular vocational option. So for example, motor vehicle or construction or hair and beauty, would better that the students start at level 1 to build those vocational skills to then move on to a level 2 at the end of Year 11 and post-16. I've already covered about the fact that you'd be working alongside the post-16 students. These programmes can include, but don't have to, because students are going to be home educated. If students are getting English and maths at home or elsewhere, this the infill programme doesn't have to include English and maths, but the majority of our infill students do opt for the English and maths. So it's a programme of study that includes the vocational qualification and then English and maths as well. And that would either be at functional skills or GCSE, depending on their knowledge at entry. So it would depend on the results of their initial assessments. In terms of applying to the infill programme, there isn't a specific on our pre-16 pages on the website. You can't go and find the Year 11 infill programme and make an application that way. You have to find the course that your child is interested in and then make an application, and our reporting process allows us to pick up any pre-16 students who have applied for those post-16 courses, and then we follow through with the application process that way so we can keep track of them. Okay, next slide please. So there were some questions about the initial assessments, and there are also questions about the initial assessments in some of the questions that came through prior to the event. So these are something that we ask all of our students to do. They are administered through a company called Skills Forward. So you can go online and you can Google search for them and just sort of find out what they're all about, what might be involved, so you can get more of an idea of what is required. They are online English and maths assessments, and we hope that we will be able to invite students in to do them at college. Now, obviously, that very much depends on what happens in terms of any lockdown restrictions being eased and relaxed, and agreement within the health and safety team at Nottingham College that we can have some additional students coming in to sit these assessments. The reason I would prefer for students to come in is twofold, really. One is because it gives an opportunity for the students to come in and experience a college environment and really get a feel for the place, and to meet members of the team, so that that's part of their transition, if you like, and part of their settling into the college programme. Because the more times we can get students into college, the more settled we find that they feel when it comes to starting the programme itself. But also, simply from a point of view of, we want to be certain that students are doing this from their own knowledge, and that they're not getting either help or support from the internet, or potentially from very well-meaning family members. We have had a couple of instances this year. Last year, all of our assessments had to be on, well, the majority had to be online, and we have had students this year who seemingly had passed the assessment, but when it came to college, and actually they've really struggled on the course, because perhaps their English and maths haven't been quite up to the level of the programme that their initial assessment results may have suggested. And when we've looked into it, we've had an admission that yes, maybe they did have a little bit of help with that. So we will keep you posted. When I talk about the process of application through to enrolment, I'll talk a little bit more about what's involved with that anyway. But essentially, we will invite you for those assessments. But obviously, we ask you just to bear with us for the time being until we know a little bit more about when we might be able to do that. And in all honesty, we're not really looking to start those assessments until after Easter, for obvious reasons. So the assessments themselves usually take about an hour for both English and maths to be completed, but there is no time limit. So students, it's really important that you understand, although I can completely appreciate that you might feel a bit anxious and nervous about having to do these assessments. They aren't tests, it's simply a way of us being able to understand where you're at with your English and maths and understand your knowledge level. But there is no time limit, so you have got plenty of time to take your time, read the question, reread the question, and if necessary, reread it for a third time, just to be certain that you've understood what the question is asking. And if it takes you 2 hours, that's absolutely fine. You know, you shouldn't be put off by some students who might finish within 45 minutes. We have had some students finish within half an hour. They haven't necessarily done as well as they would have hoped, but just make sure that you do take your time over that. The results are available immediately, so we can have discussions with students and parents straight afterwards about what the next steps are. So if they've met the entry criteria, we would explain that the next step would be a group interview, and following that, an offer of a place. If they didn't quite meet the entry criteria, we would then talk about what alternatives we might be able to offer at that point. But we can have that conversation immediately after the assessments have been completed. So those students who might be applying for the GCSE have to do a GCSE assessment, and I've broken down on the left hand side there what you are assessed for both English and maths in GCSE. So for English GCSE, it's reading, grammar and composition, punctuation and spelling. Maths is number and ratio, geometry, algebra, and then probability and statistics. And then those of you who might be looking for either of the pre-GCSE courses, we'd be looking at the functional skills assessments, and that's broken down into the English reading, grammar, punctuation and spelling, and then maths is number, measure, shape, space, handling data. But as I say, if you did want further information on the content of those assessments, you could search for Skills Forward and get some further information there. Another good way of preparing for these assessments, although if I'm completely honest, no, there's no requirement to do preparation, but if you did want to, for the functional skills assessments, you could just look for some past papers of entry 3 English and maths functional skills papers. And then for the GCSE assessment, perhaps looking at sort of making sure that you're covered from a Key Stage 3 perspective on English and Maths, and then looking at what Key Stage 4 subjects you might have to do as well. But if you've understood Key Stage 3, I would say that you're in a good position to know what to expect from the GCSE assessment as well. Okay, next slide, please. So then the final options that we have for elective home educated students are our vocational short courses. So these are courses that run for half a day a week, and they are just designed for students that might want to do an additional subject alongside their other course, or who for students who have a genuine interest in a particular curriculum area but potentially might feel a little bit anxious about joining college on a more full-time basis, or for whom a vocational infill programme, they're not quite old enough for that yet, but want to get started on a vocational course. And it's a good introductory way to get students back into a learning environment as well if they've had difficulties perhaps in a school environment. The flexibility is there with it only being 3 hours a week. There's no entry requirement for these courses, so there wouldn't be any initial assessments required. And then the courses that we offer Art and Design Level 1 and then Level 2. We started the Level 2 course because so many students really enjoyed the Level 1 and wanted to be able to progress on, but then we also found that we had a number of students that were really very talented from an art and design perspective and actually could join the course at Level 2 straight off. And that takes place at 25 Stony Street. For the last few years that's been on a Thursday afternoon, running from 1:15 until about 4:45 with a 4:30 and until about with a 15-minute break. Catering, that's at our new City Hub. Fantastic facilities down there, really lovely brand new kitchens, and the space is wonderful. And that's proved really very popular, and sadly we aren't able to offer a Level 2 progression opportunity within catering, even though I know a number of students having done that course would love to have the opportunity to do that, but unfortunately there just isn't a Level 2 qualification that we can offer to a Pre-16 student, so we are slightly restricted in that respect. This year was the first year that we offered a Performing Arts Level 1 course, and that's gone down extremely well. I know there was a question about the different elements of that Performing Arts course, about whether or not there was a sort of, you could opt in of some of those elements and whether they were mandatory. It is the tutor that makes the decision about which units are covered within that Performing Arts level course, and because the tutor is a dance specialist, there is a dance element, so that will always form part of the Performing Arts qualification. But so yes, the tutor makes that decision, although she does as much as possible listen to what her students are telling her and make amendments to her plans to incorporate as many interests as possible. And then I've written possibly Creative Media Level 1 City Hub. Well, this is hot news from the press, only from yesterday. We have had agreement that we can go ahead and offer that as well. So it's actually going to be a creative media production short course that again will be at the City Hub, and that is oh, I can see lots of questions that come in, so I'll come back to those in a moment. Yeah, so the creative media production course, we've offered it instead of the ICT course this year, which we've offered in previous years. And the reason that we've gone more down the creative media production side of things and digital media is because that seemed to be the interest of those students that were opting for the ICT course, and they had found some of the IT elements a little dry and not quite what they were anticipating and expecting. And because many of them had sort of ambitions potentially to go into media, creative media, digital media, gaming, that sort of thing, we wanted to offer something that seemed to sort of fit that bill a little better. And also understanding as well that we've got a huge sort of cohort of home ed students that can be very, very creative, and give them an opportunity just to find another outlet for that as well. So that was the thinking behind that. We are just waiting for what qualification. It looks like it'll be a UAL qualification, but we're just waiting to find out which one it will be, and waiting for those further details. But that creative media production course hopefully will be online very soon for people to apply for. It is important just to note that we do require a certain number of students in order for these courses to run. So we would need around about 10 students per course in order for them to run. But for the majority of these courses, we can go up to sort of 15, 16, possibly more with the art and design courses as well, just depending on what the applications are. But if the recruitment isn't strong enough, unfortunately, we can't run them because they aren't financially viable from a college perspective. As much as I would love for them still to be able to run, unfortunately, my hands are tied on that front. There's certain numbers that is a cut-off. So in terms of the students can just apply for one of these courses, or they could apply for 2, 3 of these short courses if they wanted to, so long as they weren't applying for any other courses. If they wanted to do 1 or 2 of these courses alongside their GCSE programme, they would have to do maybe 3 GCSEs and 1 of these courses, or 2 GCSEs and 2 of these courses. It just depends on the individual student. And then for the pre-GCSE programmes, you could choose 1 of these programmes, but only 1 of them. And again, it's timetables permitting. Okay, so let me just go to the questions quickly to see where I've got to. So one question, what happens if they don't meet the requirements? Then are they able to do other GCSE subjects they have chosen as well? So that was a question around the entry requirements and the initial assessments. So sometimes we'll have students who achieve the English grade 3, working towards grade 3 and not the maths, or vice versa. So with that, we can offer the arts, more arts and humanities type subjects for those students who get the English but don't get the maths. And if they get the maths but not the English, then we can offer the maths and the sciences, psychology and business studies, because they've got a mathematical bent as well. But we wouldn't be able to offer the arts or the humanities subjects. So there are options, and we can chop and change GCSE subjects depending on the results of the initial assessments, but you would need at least 1 grade 3 and 1 or other of them to be able to get onto the GCSE programme. So hopefully that answers that one. Then another question, would they have to concentrate on just the English and maths only? It's entirely up to the students. There is no requirement for home educated students to be doing English and maths. It doesn't naturally form part of the programme. So if you apply for GCSEs, it does not mean that you will automatically do English and maths. You would need to tell us that you're applying for English and maths. If you wanted just to do English, or just to do maths, or just to do those subjects, that's absolutely fine. It just depends on the individual student. Time of year the assessment's taken, please. As I said, I think we're looking to hopefully get those assessments sometime after Easter. If students wanted a little bit of extra time and to do an assessment later in the year because they perhaps wanted some preparation time, then that's absolutely fine. For those students that are currently on our pre-GCSE course, we never assess them until towards the end of their pre-GCSE course anyway, so that we can be certain that they've had the benefit of their English and maths tuition for the entire year before we ask them to do the assessment. If we got them to do it too early, it wouldn't necessarily be fair, and I'm very happy to extend that to anybody who's not currently on a programme. So if we do contact you after Easter and say we'd like you to come in for assessment on this date, but actually you'd like another month, or another 6 to 8 weeks preparation time, that's absolutely fine. Just let us know and we can slot you into another assessment later in the year. But we would like to see as many students assessed before the end of July as possible, simply because we do like a little bit of a break over the summer. So another question, if they finish one of the short courses, would they be able to do another one either later in the year or the following year? The short courses are for an entire academic year, so they wouldn't be able to do 2 of the short courses within the year consecutively, if you see what I mean. They would attend throughout the entire year. But yes, we have a number of students that sort of will do we'll pick different vocational short courses each year. So for example, we've had students that have done catering one year and then they've gone on to do art and design the next year, or performing arts. It just depends on the individual student. And hi Karen, nice to see you. Okay, and is creative media like film production? I don't know the answer to that yet because I haven't got the full details of the qualification. So I can't comment any further, but as soon as I have got some further details, we will obviously print that on our pre-16 pages on the website. Okay, and Are vocational short courses just for home ed students? Yep, these are exclusively for home educated students. So you will only have pre-16 home educated students on these short courses. Okay. Oh, these keep coming in thick and fast. Is there a limit on the number of students per class? I was going to cover that. I knew there was a question that I needed to cover. So in terms of class sizes, if we go through the different options, for the pre-GCSE programme, the one that will be at high pavement, the one that's perhaps that little bit more academic, the level 1 course, we have a maximum of 15 students per group. On the entry 3 course, we would initially say that we're looking at no more than 10 students in a group, but I guess depending on demand we might go up to 12, but certainly no more than 12 on that entry 3 course. For the GCSE course, for each subject we have a maximum of 20 students. Now we do sometimes start the year with possibly 22 students in a group, and that's simply because we find naturally that students try a GCSE subject and they think, do you know what, I'm not enjoying this particularly, I don't think I want to do this, or do you know what, I'm doing 4 GCSEs and oh crikey, there's a heck of an amount of work involved in all of this, I'm not sure, perhaps I need to drop one and just stick with 3. So because of that natural sort of drop off of numbers, we do lose students, you know, 1 or 2, but maybe 3 or 4 sometimes. We do sometimes extend that initial number to 22, but generally class sizes are somewhere between 15 and 20 and a maximum of 20. So I hope that answers. In terms of vocational short courses, again, we say a minimum of 10. But we could go up to, art and design can take slightly more because they've got a huge space, the workshop space is very large, so they can take up to 18 students in those groups. Catering we normally can only limit to 10 because of the size of the kitchen. Sometimes we can go up to 12. Performing arts we can go up to about 18, again because of the study space that they use, and then creative media we could go up to 15 for that as well. Okay. Can they do 3 or 4 GCSEs in 1 year and then 3 or 4 GCSEs the following year? Absolutely. We have a number of students who do that, so that by the time they finish year 11, they finish with a very similar number of GCSEs to those students who would have studied them in a mainstream school environment. Or we have students that sort of haven't been in a mainstream school environment, aren't quite sure what is involved with the GCSE, don't want to sort of overstretch themselves, so think, well, okay, I'll do 2 GCSEs in my first year, and then if I cope with that, then I might do 3 or 4 the following year. The beauty of this programme is that you have got that option to sort of have a little bit more flexibility as well. Obviously English and maths is going to be a requirement post 16. We would recommend that students start with at least 1 or other of the English and maths as their starting point on a GCSE programme, but again it does come down to the individual, and it may be that you're doing English and maths at home anyway, and it's more of the other sort of perhaps harder to sort of access subjects that you would want your child to be accessing through ourselves. Okay. Unfortunately, there is no plumbing infill course. We are restricted in terms of what we can offer for pre-16 students. There are only a certain number of qualifications that can be delivered to pre-16s, and a lot of that is around health and safety concerns. So the only course that we can offer in construction is a multi-skills course. And that they do like a round robin where they have 6 weeks of one trade, move on to another trade, move on to another trade. So they do a bit of plumbing, no, they don't do plumbing, sorry, they do a little bit of plastering, tiling, they do carpentry and joinery, painting and decorating, and brickwork. So it's not really fit for purpose for somebody who might be thinking about going into the plumbing trade. However, it does get them into learning at Basford Hall, where they would study if they were going down the plumbing route later on. It gets them used to the tutors within that curriculum area, used to the way of studying. And so in terms of a transition opportunity, it's really helpful. But also what it does provide is that very sort of basic generic introduction to the construction industry. And it means that students who progress from a multi-skills construction course are actually have got a better foundation and knowledge of the construction industry as a whole going into plumbing, and therefore potentially puts them, you know, a step ahead of some of their peers who perhaps haven't had the benefit of that full understanding. Okay. Is there ever a prom for year 11s? Please don't give me the headache of having to organise a prom. No, unfortunately, we don't offer that. It's potentially something that we could look at if we had students that were very keen on organising that. But so far we haven't organised a prom. But as I say, that's not to say that we wouldn't necessarily look to see what we could offer. Okay, so I think that's it for the questions for the time being. So I will move on. Next slide, please. So then just a little bit about our college expectations. We are very flexible in terms of the way in which we can structure a programme for our young people, and certainly much more flexible than our colleagues can be within a school environment, and that really can play to the advantage of our young people. But at the same time, we still do have clear expectations around behaviour, and in that sense we perhaps aren't drastically different from a school. But we ask all of our students to be kind. It's our biggest mantra. You know, an awful lot of our young people have had really tough times in an education environment. They've struggled with their peers, they've perhaps been the victim of bullying themselves, and that's the reason that they've become home educated. We've got a lot of young people who've suffered from anxiety and panic attacks and things like that, and so we really are proud of the fact that the majority of our students are kind to one another and kind to themselves as well. But it is a real big mantra of ours that we want to make sure that people are sort of respectful and mindful of the other experiences that people may have had, and that they are respectful of their fellow learners as well. So we ask them to be kind to themselves, to others, and to their learning environment. We do expect attendance to be at 95%, and I have to say I've been looking at attendance figures today, and our figures are really positive. We do have great attendance for our pre-16 students, so we're not quite, well, actually in the majority of our subjects we are just around about 95%, which, given the fact that we're currently in lockdown and students are attending online lessons, we're really proud of. But we do understand that there may be some reasons why students can't quite reach that benchmark of 95%, and that might be around some support issues, it might be around some health issues, and we will work with students and parents about how we can sort of support you with that, whilst also hoping that students can attend as many lessons as possible. We ask all our students to be punctual to lessons. You miss 5-10 minutes at the start of a lesson, you've potentially missed a significant chunk of what you're about to learn. So and it's a distraction to their own learning, it's a distraction to the tutor who's delivering, and it's a distraction to the learners within the class who have turned up on time. We do ask that holidays and appointments are made outside of college times. I know it's very tempting as home educated parents to think, well, who's going on holiday at the moment? I don't think any of us are, but under normal circumstances it can be very tempting to think, well, I'm home educating my child, I'm not restricted to the same school holidays as other parents might be. But we do still ask that any holidays are made outside of college times. You know, college does finish for our students at the end of June, so you have still got July when you can be making holiday plans. Probably not this year, but potentially, fingers crossed, next year. And obviously any appointments, medical appointments, can be difficult to rearrange, but if possible, if those can be made outside of college times as well, we would appreciate that. We ask students to come to college ready to learn with the right equipment, the right mindset and appropriate clothing. So the right equipment. I've done invigilation for maths exams for the last couple of years, and it always amazes me the number of students that will turn up to a maths exam without a calculator, without a ruler, without a compass, and yet they know that they're going to need this equipment. So we ask that students think about what they need in order to make sure that they can learn appropriately. Getting into that good habit during their lessons means that when it comes to exams, they are going to be prepared as well. Appropriate clothing. We don't have a uniform policy. Students are free to wear what they want within reason, but we do ask that if you are wearing shorts, that we can see that you're wearing shorts and they're not hidden under a long t-shirt. And we do ask that if you are wearing anything with any kind of logo or anything emblazoned across your chest, that it's not going to be offensive to anybody. But within that, you know, piercings are not an issue. Different colour hair dyes, not an issue. If you want to come in one day with a Mohican, absolutely not a problem. We are not going to ask you to go to any kind of isolation or anything like that. So that does make us very, very different from a school environment. But we do also then ask that our students respect the learning environment, so that, you know, rubbish is put in bins, the classroom is left as it should be, and the right learning environment for anybody else who's then going to be coming to use that space afterwards as well. We are obviously, the majority of our courses are based where we've got post-16 students. We don't want our pre-16 students to be standing out any more than they need to be, and for the majority of the time they don't, but on occasions we can have some immature behaviour of students running up and down corridors and being slightly noisier than we would want, and so we just ask that actually nobody draws attention to themselves in that way. Okay. So there was a question, I can see that Hilda has already responded to that about students. We can take home educated students from anywhere, just to reiterate, the students don't have to be within Nottingham City or Nottinghamshire, and we do have students that have come from Derbyshire, Leicestershire, Lincolnshire. I think that's as far afield as we've been, yeah. But there's no restriction in that respect. So how do we apply? I'm going to come on to that in a moment. Do you publish the term time dates? We do publish the term time dates. When students enrol with us, we usually have an enrolment date in the summer, and students are given a pack at that point which contains their timetable, it contains term dates, it contains a student handbook, a parent handbook, and other useful information for the college. So all of that information is contained within that. But the term dates are also published on our Nottingham College website as well. So, question about the infill courses, are they courses level 2 GCSE equivalent? As I said, the majority of the infill courses we do offer at level 1. Occasionally we can offer some, for example, in art and design, creative media, fashion. Sometimes we can offer the level 2, the ones that might not have that sort of health and safety element to them. We can't offer in hair or beauty or motor vehicle or construction, as I was saying, because of the health and safety risks, but yes, that we can offer infill places in other areas at level 2. Just to be clear about the equivalents, if you were doing an infill course that was vocational, and then potentially were looking to apply for a programme that required say an A-level programme that required 5 GCSEs entrance, and you thought, well, I can use my vocational qualification that's level 2 and equivalent to a GCSE as entry criteria. You couldn't do that for A-levels, but it can be used as entry criteria for the next level on vocational programme. But just be wary of drawing a GCSE equivalent to some of the level 2 courses if you want to say that you've studied a certain number of GCSE subjects. Okay, is there a dress code? As I said, no, there isn't. We just want to make sure that it's, people aren't wearing anything too short, nothing too low, not too much belly on show. As I say, hair colour, not an issue. Piercings, not an issue. Okay. All right, next slide, please. So student support. All of our home educated students are entitled to the same support as our full-time post-16 student. So that means that they have access to an achievement coach, which is the pastoral support that we offer. Our achievement coaches are there to work with students who may find that there are barriers to their learning outside of education, and they just need some support with that. So a bit like a mentor, really. All of our students will have a personal tutor, and we talked about the tutorial process. You've also got access to the Pre-16 and schools team for an additional layer of support as well. If we've got students that have got an additional learning need, additional learning support therefore is available for them. We can't always guarantee that we can put a learning support assistant into classes, but the majority of our pre-GCSE courses, if a learning assistant is required, we can normally get those in for support for English and maths lessons at the very least. But we do also have students on our GCSE programme who might have a learning support assistant in taking notes for them. And so, yeah, it's not impossible, but it is a finite resource, so just be mindful of that. We can't guarantee that support will be in place in class. And then if students require exam access arrangements, these will be assessed in college, but we do ask parents, if you've had a child in school relatively recently and they have had access arrangements awarded in school and have got a Form 8 that sort of explains that, we do ask if we can have a copy of that, just because that's a good starting point for us to be able to assess those exam access arrangements. Okay. I'll come to that question that I've just seen posted at the very end, if that's okay. So I'm just looking at the time and mindful that people might be thinking that they want their tea. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. I will come back to that question about the GCSEs though. So just to say about safeguarding, we do take our safeguarding responsibilities very seriously, and obviously with pre-16 students there's an extra layer of consideration. We do get parental consent from parents at the beginning of the course, and that's to give us permission, or that a parent will give their permission for their child to study with ourselves. It also gives permission or not for photographs to be taken if it's required for their course, but also potentially in any promotional material. Gives permission for any trips and activities that might be involved in their course. So some of the short courses, for example, art and design, they sometimes go off into Nottingham City Centre just to do a little bit of artwork. The creative media production, they might go and do some photography, for example, within their 3-hour session, and so that consent covers that. Although we'd always notify you if that was going to be happening anyway, with an additional notification, as I say. In terms of lunchtime arrangements, as I have said, we don't offer supervision. We can't offer supervision. We haven't got the staff resources to be able to do that. So we do trust our students to behave themselves at lunchtime. And if a parent hasn't given permission for a child to leave campus, we can't police that. We can't monitor it. We can make a note of it, and if we see that child leaving the campus at lunchtime, we can challenge them and explain that they shouldn't be going, but ultimately we can't have somebody stood on the front door checking whether or not they are allowed or not allowed to go from campus. We do ask that all communications are done via email if possible, just to cut down on any kind of postage costs. Our communication to you guys will be via email, and that's in terms of attendance monitoring. So James monitors attendance to every lesson. If a student hasn't turned up, a parent will receive a text to say your child has been marked absent, and to contact James if they haven't already done so. So we do that on a lesson by lesson basis. We monitor peer relationships, so if we have any concerns about what might be going on between young people, we monitor that closely and then report that to parents and talk to the students involved as appropriate. And then just to say that I am one of the designated safeguarding officers for the college, but specifically for pre-16 students. So I've got a very good understanding of the safeguarding agenda and how to keep our young people safe. Next slide, please. Okay, so financial support. Again, we talked about the fact that additional learning support is offered to our pre-16s in the same way as it is for post-16, and that's no different for financial support. So our home ed students are entitled to the same financial support for transport as our post-16 students. There is an online financial support form that requires evidence of income using the application account. So when you've applied to Nottingham College, you will have set up an application account, and it's that account that you use in order to be able to make an application for financial support. There is a threshold, a family income threshold, that would mean whether a parent would or would not receive that financial support, but it's all detailed on our website. The financial support is processed on first come first served basis. So actually last year the transport fund did run out by Christmas, I believe. So it is important that you do get a financial support application in as early as possible. It can't be awarded until your child has started at college for obvious reasons, and so there can be a delay at the very beginning, but the sooner you get the application in, and you will be sent many prompts to do that over the summer, the better. So there can be an initial delay due to the numbers of applications that need to be processed. And in the last couple of years, we've also been able to offer lunch vouchers. Now, this isn't, it's a separate fund that is available. Again, it's sort of a finite resource, so if it runs out, unfortunately. But we have been able to access that fund as well for our pre-16s, and it's dependent. If you receive the transport financial support, then you would also be entitled to the lunch vouchers. So hopefully that explains everything. Let me just have a quick look at questions. So, okay, I'll come back to those questions at the end because they're quite generic questions. Next slide then, please. So application to enrolment, we are nearly there, guys, so thank you for bearing with me. I didn't anticipate it taking this long. Clearly I can talk longer than I thought I could. So in order to make an application, I imagine the majority of you have already made an application, but you need to complete the application online. So if you're looking at the pre-GCSE programmes or the short courses, you can do that by going on to the Pre-16 Home Educated tab on our website, Nottingham College website, and then just scrolling down to the very bottom and finding the courses, making sure that if it's pre-GCSE, you're looking at the pre-GCSE. If you click onto that, it gives you more information about the course, and then you'll see an Apply Now button on the right hand side. Click that Apply Now button and that takes you to the online application forms. That would be the same for the GCSE programme and the short courses. If you're looking for an infill application, as I said earlier, you won't find a direct link on the pre-16 pages. What you will need to do is to go do a course search on our website, look for the curriculum area that you're interested in, look for the subject then that you're interested in, and then click on those courses that might be relevant. But realistically, you're looking at either a level 1 or a level 2 programme. If it's something that we can't offer to you, we would get in contact with you and say, unfortunately, we can't offer that programme, but this is the course that we could offer. But you would essentially apply for an infill place in the same way as a post-16 student would. So it is about, there's no easy way of being able to provide a link, unfortunately, through our pre-16 pages. It is about going on to our course study options and searching for the curriculum area that you're interested in. So once we have received the applications, your application automatically goes on hold, and that's because all pre-16 students' applications go on hold. It isn't anything to worry about. It's simply to allow time for the pre-16 team to review the applications, check that there are no issues in terms of whether it's an appropriate course or not, one that we can offer or not. And then following that, a student would be taken off hold and invited in for the online English and Maths assessments. But it is important to stress at this stage, the majority of students are going to remain on hold because we can't yet offer those assessment dates until we know what's happening with lockdown. So it's likely that your child will remain on hold up until Easter. So please don't panic if you feel like you've been on hold for some time. So you would, following the assessments and the successful completion of the assessments, admissions will then invite the student in for a group or an individual interview with a curriculum area. More and more these days, it's about a group interview, a meet the team event, and it's designed to be an information giving event more than an interview. It's just that some areas still call it group interview, and it's very much about asking questions to find out more about what's involved. So parents and students shouldn't be put off by the idea of having an interview. It's not that at all. It's simply an information provision exercise. So following that, a student is offered a place and asked to confirm the acceptance. The parental consent form is sent at the same time, and then students will be invited for an enrolment day in July or August, depending on the course that they've applied for. And just to say there, so it keeps on hovering, I can't quite see what it says underneath there. Student will likely begin, yes, induction week commencing the 6th of September 2021. So that's the week that we're looking that students will be starting with us from September. Okay. I'm going to come to all of those questions later. So next slide, please. I think that might be it in terms of slides. Yes, so questions. If we go back to some of the questions in the chat. So The questions about the additional GCSEs have been answered by Hilda, thank you very much. Are your courses oversubscribed, or if the students meet the English and Maths requirements, is it likely they will get on the course? So we do get oversubscribed. Currently, we've already got enough applications for GCSE psychology and sociology, so that's an indication of how quickly these places can go. If you've already got your application in, though, it's very likely that your child will get those options that they've chosen on the GCSE programme, because the earlier application will have ensured that, but obviously that is subject to the assessments. So yes, if they pass the English and Maths assessments, unless you've been notified that you're on a waiting list for a subject, the likelihood is they will get on the course. Okay. What are the costs for GCSE courses at Nottingham College? If you attend the course with us and you're enrolled with ourselves, there are no costs to any of the courses at Nottingham College. Nottingham College does offer a private candidature service, and that obviously does cost. And if you are interested in that, let us know and we can send you a link for the exams inquiry form, and you can pose a question to them directly. Is there a cafe in college where they can buy lunch? Yes, we have got a cafe, hot and cold food served, if a child is entitled to those lunch vouchers can be redeemed in the college cafe as well. So yeah, it's reasonable food, salads, obviously there's chips, pizzas, and they'll do a sort of pasta bake, jacket potatoes, vegan options, vegetarian options, paninis, baguettes, and some really nice cakes. And what happens if you can't attend the enrolment day due to holidays? That isn't a problem. We can always do enrolment on another day. There are ways around that, so don't worry about that. If it does clash with anything that you may have planned, we can work around that. Can you apply for, say, the vocational pre-16 course and also the infill if you're unsure which would be best suited? It's difficult to make two applications. I think probably what would be better is to potentially have a conversation prior to application, and then we can talk through what the options are and really understand exactly what it is that your child is after, to then make a decision. If your child's got a very clear idea and is going to be in year 11 next year, has got a clear idea of the vocational route they want to take, I would recommend the infill programme. But if they are wavering a little bit, or perhaps you think they might need that extra little bit of support and nurturing before they go on to a full-time course, then maybe the vocational pre-16 might be the better option. But Natalie, I would suggest potentially either emailing us separately or letting us have your contact details, and we'll give you a call to discuss that further. And then, why do you email for the entry 3 course? Who do you email? Sorry. Right. So the email addresses at the bottom on this page here. You can email any one of us, or all three of us, if you would like to let us know if it is the entry 3 programme that you're interested in. And as I say, we'll take a note of that and start to sort of collate expressions of interest list to make sure that you are offered that place when that course does become available. Okay, so I think that's it for questions that have been posted. As I said at the beginning, you may well have very personal questions that you don't want to share with everybody, and that's absolutely fine. So please do take a note of our email addresses here, and give us just explain what your question is, and then if it's easier for us to give us a call, provide us your contact number as well, and we will give you a call to talk in further detail. Please, can I just ask though, there are 3 email addresses on there, and although I'm doing the presentation tonight, Hilda and James might kill me for saying this, but please don't think that you need to direct all of your questions at me. I'm sure you can appreciate it is a very busy time at the moment, so if it does take us 2 or 3 days to get back to you, please bear with us. It's just that with everything that is going on, I'm sure you can appreciate that we've got a lot on our plates at the moment. So yeah, but we will get back to you, but it doesn't necessarily have to be me. And if Hilda and James can't help, then obviously they will pass it on to me anyway. Okay. Okay, so just to say that you will get sent a link to this presentation. You probably don't want to sit through another hour and 20 minutes of it, but there may be sections of it that will be pertinent that you just want to refer back to. That's absolutely fine. If you're aware of anybody who's not been able to make it into tonight's event, we will be able to send them a link. So if they, again, just email us, or if you email us their email address, we can contact them and send them the link so that they have got this information. But hopefully we've covered everything, and if not, you'll contact us directly with anything further. So thank you very much for joining us. Apologise it's gone on a little longer than I anticipated, but hopefully you've got everything from it that you needed, and we look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon. Take care. Bye bye.